Hey on guys, welcome to another episode of the Raw Report. I'm your host, Ryan Jackson Saw. We have a very special episode for you today. We are talking to Felicia Peters, and we're going to be discussing some of the ongoing original sovereign tribal rights and things that are happening across the land. Anyone who's been paying a lot of attention knows that the UN Agenda 21 is looking to move people off the land. And one of the first people that they're going for is the original sovereign people. So it's very, very important that we get to know what's happening there with basically the attack that's going against the original sovereigns. Felicia, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you, Ryan? I'd like to just correct it. It's Morgan, Felicia Morgan, hyphenated Peters.
Sure. Felicia Morgan, can you tell us a bit about yourself before we get started?
Yeah, so I come off the tribe of the Yorta Yorta peoples down here in Victoria on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. We all originated from that tribal area and around the Cummeragunja Reserve area, which is famous for the Cummeragunja Walk-Off back in the 1930, sorry, in regards to William Cooper and Jack Patton and Bill Ferguson. And that walk-off was famous for fighting for land rights and the conditions that our people were living under at that time when the Aboriginal Protection Board and the policy first came upon us.
Right, so your tribe's been very involved in the fight for original sovereign rights for a long time, then.
Yeah, that's right. They have been, and it's been they've been very prominent in the human rights movement as well. So we've been very active in the movement around human rights and land rights, and so nothing's really different now. It's just that some are going in another direction. Ever since the native title case in the High Courts, when Yorta Yorta people lost their native title case, it was extinguished based on information that was provided at the time, and it just kind of set us back. But I think overall it was a good thing, because now we haven't entered into any contracts or titles with the federal government or state governments at this stage. Going down a history and understanding who we are as nations and clans, but also the sovereign side of it and the law side of things is what I've just learnt recently last year.
Yeah, so basically, I want to know a bit more about native title. See, there's been a lot of reports coming in. I've talked to a lot of people about this. Many people are claiming that the people that are being put in charge of the native title for the various different nations are actually being allocated there by the Commonwealth or by corporations, so that the corporations can then use that to take control of the land. Do you think that that's very prevalent, or is that something that's just in a couple of areas?
Well, this is the problem: is that they had the agenda for the treaty from the get-go. They had the framework. They wasn't being transparent in what that framework was, and so what we've worked out for ourselves is that it's a corporation treaty. So under self-determination, all the health services will come under the treaty, and all the native title services will come under the treaty. And so that's what the government is basically treating with the corporation. So the Office of Registry Indigenous Corporation in Canberra, they are the regulators for the nationwide of corporations. And they're in partnership with the National Indigenous Australian Agency. And in their office sits the Empowerment of Community Policy and Closing the Gap Funds. So what we've learned is that the empowerment community will implement the cashless card and work for the dole. So really, it's work for the cashless card, which is the same methods as the Aboriginal Protection Board. Is the whole reason why our people walked off Cummeragunja Reserve,
Mm.
because they wanted to work, they wanted to obtain an income. They didn't want to work for rations. They didn't want to
Mm.
work for flour, sugar, and tea. They originally came over from Maloga Mission, and the government forced them onto Cummeragunja Reserve. And from Maloga Mission, they really learned. They really became really well educated men. And so so everything that we fought from the past, now we are here revisiting these same methods. But what the government's going to do is pay the people to
Mm.
basically sign off on genocide.
Right.
So if you can't get any, we've got the one-stop shops in each town with the health services. Now, under that umbrella sits, domestic violence, health, justice, stolen generation. Everything sits under the one roof. So, one CEO, overlooks all these programs, which is really impossible because every program has its own content of what people need.
Mm.
And so, we feel like our issues are being centralised, and and our plights and stuff are not being heard as a whole.
Mm.
And they think that just reconciliation, which is another platform that they're using to do this treaty, that is really absurd, because how can you reconcile when you're not even being given any rights at the ground level, at the grassroots level, to be able to speak on some of the issues that the people at the top level are supposed to be paid to help us, you know, um, move
Mm.
forward in some of these health issues.
This is
So
exactly
for
how the
me,
government's rules. It basically it will centralize an authority. It will determine who its chosen people are to represent larger populations of the groups, and then control those people so that they can lock everyone into the new system. Obviously, this is an ongoing problem with obviously trying to take away the rights of the original sovereign people, because they were their own self-determined nations. All of you are, and the government has
that's right.
no claim here. It is ruling under
That's right.
maritime law because it doesn't have land rights. What are you guys exposing
Exactly.
the fact that there is a law, that's it's a crown law, and it basically says that if you commit genocide on any land, then your right to claim the land, any land title, is immediately dissolved. Now, couldn't this be
Exactly.
exploited
And I
to? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I do know about that. And I mentioned it on a Zoom live with some of the other sovereign mobs, about that you can't go into a land and be aggressive and commit violence as a whole to maintain that land.
Hmm.
And so that kind of leads to, just from the reconciliation, and now the Uluru Statement, which is going to centralise our voice at the federal level.
Hmm.
And that wasn't a grassroots decision. That was corporations' decision that
Hmm.
happened in up in Uluru, where some of them walked out because there wasn't no grassroots people in there. They were kind of locked out of there.
Yeah.
So the treaty and the Uluru Statement were corporations treatying with corporations. This is where everything's going.
Hmm.
And so for a moment, the people thought that it was going to really bring what they wanted. They finally, thought that the government had finally heard their plight from all the protests that we've had, chanting treaty. But treaty wasn't about corporations. Treaty was about
Hmm.
land rights.
Hmm.
So the only thing missing in this dialogue is land rights.
Right.
So they've changed the chant from what do we want, land rights, to always was, always will be. So I could see how the movement has tried to dilute us as a whole of what we originally wanted as First Nation people.
Hmm.
And, to have no native have no rights to native farming and been able to produce our own foods is genocide. Because when you go into a country and you remove their dietary system, you remove their
Mm.
language, you remove their children, you remove their law, you remove them from their traditional, from their tribal lands, that's genocide. And then you're
Absolutely.
coming in with guns, and you know you're forcing our people into these one place. You know, and as you know, everyone's got tribal boundaries. So that wasn't easy for our people as well. But at the same time, um, they forced us with guns, and then they took away our having gun rights, and then gave a license for people to shoot Aboriginal people.
Mm.
So just learning how the history as a whole has kind of oppressed us, we are now going back into that. And I feel they're still being aggressive towards us. Like they're not that they just don't care. They don't care. And some of the
Yeah.
stuff that I've seen today, just in regard to the Cubby Cubby Nation, they were in court trying to protect the sacred sites up there in Queensland. Um, you know, the judge requested for them to come back to court, and because they didn't want to go behind the floodgates, one of them
Mm.
was arrested. I mean, this
Not just
person was an
arrested.
elder.
There was several witnesses that he was actually taken at the back and punched. And
Yeah,
yeah, people don't know if he's okay or not. And that's
yeah, and
not
they
safe.
still
It should be
don't know
happening.
his well-being at all. So this is only the things that are yet to come, and so nothing's changed.
Hmm.
Like that kind of treatment, where is the reconciliation in that kind of treatment? Where you're treating our old people with disregard still to this day.
Hmm.
So, we've got a high rate of heart disease, we've got a high rates of diabetes through not having rights to our dietary system.
Hmm.
We have high rates of incarceration, child removal. Victoria there was a task force 1000 in 2017. That is now changed to 3,000 children out of home care.
Hmm.
I mean, it's going back to the point where children are being removed from the hospitals again. So nothing's changed. So what are we reconciling when they're still removing children from the hospital,
Hmm.
when they're
Well,
still removing children as a whole?
well, it's a kind of like this is like clown world. This is everything that's true is now reversed. Instead of you giving the government land rights, you're begging them for land rights, and they don't have the right to give you those land rights because it's your land. Uh, so you're kind of caught in
Exactly.
this court system now that's geared heavily towards the government protecting its own power, and it probably won't give you any leeway at whatsoever. It's a kangaroo
So
court
that's the
system.
point. That's right, and that's the point I wanted to make. So what I found out, right, is that Governor Richard Burke wrote a letter of proclamation in 1835, which stated that the land was vacant and it was terra nullius.
Hmm.
So terra nullius never came from Captain Cook; it came from Governor Richard Burke, and it
Wow.
came in August after the John Batman Treaty in 1835, June of 1835 in Port Phillip. And so he wrote a letter about the treaty. He wrote a letter about no purchase or contracts can be made. That he was claiming all vacant lands from Tasmania all the way up to Cape York. So that to me made me question. Well, how are we going to the High Court, proving that we are the originals, um, and overturning terra nullius is what
Hmm.
the Mabo case did.
Hmm.
So what they did is that they tricked us. They tricked us to go into these courts to prove who we are for the purpose to enter a contract to negotiate their laws on our land. Because before that, they had no jurisdiction here. And they still don't as a whole. So to me, I'm saying, well, that's an unconscionable contract because you've led us into something that's made us to believe that we were going to have land rights, but really you was really giving yourself a title because you
Hmm.
don't have any deeds and titles or proof to this land.
Hmm.
So the only way you're going to have proof to this land is through the NAIDOC through the native title.
Right.
And so I thought, how contradictory is that? So really overall, because the country was never claimed terra nullius by the Crown originally, because King William put a King's patent on South Australia, which is in Latin terms Terra Australis. So when he claimed Terra Australis, it was really South Australia.
Right.
In 1836. So it was a year later, because the Crown was basically saying, no, we're only claiming this part. We're not claiming the rest of the South Continent. So to me, in my mind, I thought, well, then they've claimed these lands unwarranted. They are actually committing treason against the king, because the king's patent is, it's in cancel. You can't turn it. You can't go either way. So when the letter went, when Governor Richard Bourke's letter went to the Parliament of England, that letter was rejected by the Crown, because they already had, as a part of their first instructions that they gave to Captain Cook, that to explore the land, but just claim one part for a penal colony. That was all they were supposed to do, and that they were supposed to get consent of the tribal people. And so when they say terra nullius, well, when Bennelong went to to meet the Crown, he went over there and educated on who he was, how everything worked, how our food source worked, and he come back on the ship, dressed as a gentleman, and they were supposed to look after him, but they didn't. They pushed him aside, so he went back to his native ways and so forth. But what that said to me is that they were given the information in 1788 that the land was occupied.
That's right. Of course it was. You had a whole nation. You even had trade certificates with the Dutch. There was established trade here before they arrived, the British. I mean, when it comes down to it, when it really boils down to it, the Australian government doesn't actually have claim to this land. And so maybe since they're acting in a corrupt way, could you take this to the UK courts? Because you have a legitimate claim against the Crown there.
Well, I just want to make one mention here that that the Dutch, they basically saying that they treated on the Dutch originally colonizing or originally settling here, and because there was no war between them, they settled here peacefully. That was their interpretation of settling here peacefully. But when you look at the Spanish Inquisition, it cuts off half of the world, right? And so it only made Western Australia under that doctrine of discovery, and the rest didn't. And that's why the king only claimed South Australia in their law system, in their understanding of how things work. Even though we never had no say in that process. So when the Uluru Statement went to the Pope for the Pope to consent on it, they're really speaking on behalf of Western Australia, because Western Australia comes under that. So that's why when they had the federations and all the states came together, Western Australia was the last one to come in, because they really don't really come under the Crown. They come under the doctrine of discovery. So it's all a misconception to us to believe a certain way. But when you really go back to understanding how they colonized it, it really comes under the Piracy Act, because they came here as pirates and they plundered our goods, and now they need it in writing, because there's nothing written. There's nothing in writing to say that we've given over this land. So this treaty, this state treaty, is a propaganda. It's basically saying that we're doing something for you, but it's really us doing something for them and getting nothing in return. So if you don't, so it's really saying we're gonna look after your health problems and we're gonna take away your land. So we're taking more away, and some of these facilitators that are a part of the National Indigenous Australian Agency, which is Empowerment of Community, which was co-designed by Twiggy Forrest, the mining industry. And Twiggy Forrest is a family member of John Forrest, who was the Premier of Western Australia, who was part of the slave trade, who they actually had to bring to court and question his humanity because the way he was treating the Western Australian, tribes that over in Western Australia. So, if you see all the photos of First Nation people in chains, they were part of his doings. So his family member now, Andrew Twiggy Forrest, is a part of co-designing the treaty, co-designing the Uluru. He's a part of all of it, and he's paying these certain facilitators millions of dollars. So in Victoria, we have the facilitator in Shepparton. His name is Paul Briggs. So he's the facilitator for Victoria. And what he does all the data collection. And so you've got to have domestic violence. You've got to have child removal to use these services now. You can't just have overall issues. You've got to have those particular issues. So when people were going through domestic violence, they wasn't really getting any help because they wanted the statistics to rise. So the Northern Territory intervention was a propaganda to stigmatise First Nation men as pedophiles, because John Howard in that same cabinet of his government introduced a 90-year suppression order, which was to protect the pedophile rings. Right. So what he did, he first stigmatised our people with it. This all come after the Mabo and the Wick case. So he wanted to create propaganda for people to look at us like we were bad people, but he was really protecting their own. And this is the stuff that our people don't really understand and know about as a whole. So that's why we were still having backlash, or people, even presenters like Kerry Ann Kennell were saying, pedophile rings. Why aren't you worried about those particular things? The federal police went in there and found no pedophile rings. The pedophile really was sitting really under Parliament House. So, and now they're attacking our First Nation men again through domestic violence, which is a long line of being oppressed and having nothing, no land, having no rights to your family. They can come in and take your family. They can come in and lock you up whenever they want. They can come and kill you whenever they want, and no one's held accountable.
Yeah, of course, that leads to depression. It leads to drinking. It leads to domestic violence. It leads to all kinds of stressful, basically reactions to that, what the government's been putting on the people. Unfortunately,
right. Let's not forget one thing before you go.
Yeah.
When Britain came here, they came here as convicts because England was poor from all the wars that they went through. And all those issues came from being poor. So what do they expect from us when they keep us oppressed and keep us poor? They think that nothing should come out of that. So, so it just goes, it defeats the whole point of having a treaty and then giving away our land for nothing.
Right. This has been an absolutely fascinating journey of history and perspective. Thank you so much for your time. Before we go, is there any last messages you want to leave with our listeners at home?
Yes, so we have the NAIDOC week coming up on the 8th of July, which is a Friday next week. We really want to get some of the sovereign people down here to help educate the Victorian First Nations people on what sovereignty means. Also, at the same time, learning about what this treaty is going to do for us. I mean, we need to really get this out on big platforms like NAIDOC, and really speak the truth out. I mean, these political leaders are not telling the truth. They're leading us into a treaty, which is leading us into a death trap to get us to sign off on a death certificate, which is genocide. So that's my final thing. But yeah, if you can't come to Melbourne to these NAIDOC marches and learn, go to your local NAIDOC events and have a conversation. Because if we don't have this conversation, it's our children that are ones that are going to suffer for it.
That's right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
And there you have it. There's a bit of an insight into the battles that have been waged by the original sovereign people against the government, and the challenge of sovereignty, the power play that is happening out there right now. When I have said at the beginning of this video that this is one of the best avenues for fighting the international cabal, I really meant it, because their victory is the victory of all Australian people, not just the tribes, but all of us, because they are claiming back the land, and this is the way to do it. So throw your full support behind them at the this NAIDOC week. Go meet up with the people there, and share some of these messages that you heard in this video today. Thanks for watching. This has been the Raw Report. I'm Ryan Jackson Saw, and we'll see you next time.